Well, this definitely doesn't look like a jet. It kind of looks like a flying saucer, and then it turns sideways, which is really weird. So, as far as you know, we don't have anything that moves like that.
No.
And we don't have anything that gives off a signature like that.
No.
And were they able to figure out where this is going or keep an eye on it? Or do we have sensors that can detect this for any length of time?
I don't have that information.
Hey guys, it's Sai. If you're super curious but don't always have the time to watch your favourite podcasts, you found the right place. Here's your summary of Joe Rogan number 2244, featuring Ryan Graves, in less time than it takes for a UFO to fly over New Jersey. Let's jump in. This out-of-the-world podcast, lasting just over 2.5 hours, let Joe and Ryan dive deep into a lot of interesting topics, ranging from UAPs, government secrecy, and the implications on the human race. Ryan Graves is introduced as a former US Navy pilot with first-hand experience with UFOs. He describes his career path, from his initial training to his time in the service. Graves shares stories about his deployments, focusing particularly on those related to unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP. He explains how his encounters led to a significant interest in the subject, prompting him to speak publicly about his experiences.
So we should explain to people that didn't listen to our first podcast why you're uniquely qualified to talk about this stuff. Could you just please tell people your background so they understand what you used to do and how you got involved in this whole UAP thing in the beginning?
Yeah, absolutely. So, formerly trained aerospace engineer in college, joined the Navy immediately after with the hopes to go fly fighter jets for the Navy. Was successful in doing that, and I flew the F-18 Super Hornet for 11 years and 2 deployments, primarily operating off of Virginia Beach. And pretty standard career until about 2013 or so.
His background in aviation is highlighted as crucial to understanding his credibility when discussing UAPs. I flew FA-18s for the Navy, and that's where I saw things I couldn't explain, Graves notes. His transition from active duty to becoming a voice in the UAP community is discussed, emphasizing his role in destigmatizing the topic. Graves recounts specific incidents where he and his squadron encountered UAPs over the Atlantic Ocean. He describes these objects as having remarkable flight characteristics, like sudden acceleration, and the ability to hover without any visible means of propulsion. The pilot's reactions to these sightings are detailed, including the initial disbelief and later acceptance of the reality of these phenomena. They would just appear out of nowhere, and then they'd be gone.
Now we have them all over New Jersey, all the way up to Massachusetts. And it's hard to tell exactly with the quality of the reporting right now, because it seems to be, the bigger this story gets, the more people are just looking up and seeing anything and pointing it out. But there are reports from Texas to Florida to California, Ohio, Minnesota, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's not just New Jersey itself, it seems. So this isn't just a one-off event. It is in the sense that it's so large and so many people are paying attention to it. But this has been occurring for at least 3 years around military bases. I'm a little hesitant to link it to the full story that we've been having here, this full conversation, but at least for 3 years, this has been occurring. Why can't we do more about it? It's a hard problem, I think, for a number of reasons. It's hard, but it's very solvable, right? I think this can be solved. We can solve it. But right now, kind of the word on the street is that these objects appear to be coming from over the ocean. There's senior congressmen, there's Coast Guard personnel, there's law enforcement. They're seeing a large number of these come from somewhere over the ocean. I don't know if that means necessarily they're popping out of the water physically or if they're coming from some unknown location in the water and then proceeding over the coast.
The strategic implications of such sightings near military training areas are explored, along with how these events were reported up the chain of command. The conversation shifts to the possible technology behind these UAPs. Graves speculates on whether these crafts could be from an advanced human adversary or something entirely different. He discusses the potential for reverse engineering if any of these objects were recoverable, but points out the lack of any known instances of this happening. The discussion includes the physics-defying maneuvers observed, suggesting technology far beyond current human capabilities. We're talking about things moving in ways that our jets can't match, he explains.
is it a heat signature that they're giving off? So maybe there's some sort of a cooling mechanism inside of these things? Like, that's got to be giving off some kind of heat, right?
Yeah, and that goes to some like very base physics, right? Like we create heat whenever we have, stored energy and we utilize it. So to be able to mitigate that to such a degree that you can't even detect them at all. I mean, I can imagine you can reduce your signature. We do it in fighter jets, right? Through kind of just like baffles where we cover the engine essentially to make it harder to see. But to have zero ability to detect or lock onto these objects is not a technology I'm familiar with.
So other than that, are they exhibiting any type of movement that's extraordinary, or their ability to turn angles? Is there anything about them that points to this being superior technology?
It's tough to say. Based on what I've seen just in the public from reports and kind of amateur photographers and witnesses, some of them do seem to be making pretty sharp turns. I wouldn't call them like physics breaking turns, but they don't seem to be operating like a normal aircraft, right? So they're down low. They're making what appear to be pretty high G turns, maybe like 3, 4, 5 G turns at relatively low airspeeds. For them to be able to make these high G maneuvers and then remain in the area for another 5 or 6 or 7 hours and still have the battery life or whatever's propelling them, to then go over the ocean to a point where they're untrackable. Again, I'm not really familiar with that type of capability either.
The implications for national security and technological advancement are pondered, with Graves expressing a desire for transparency in UAP research. Graves talks about the government's response to UAP incidents, including historical secrecy and recent efforts toward disclosure. He refers to the establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO, and its mission. The podcast touches on the skepticism and resistance within the government to acknowledge UAPs fully. There's been a culture of silence that's slowly breaking down.
Folks that are friendly to this topic coming in with the Trump administration open up a very key opportunity window for us to move this conversation forward.
When you look at it from their perspective, what would rationalize trying to downplay this, where they think it would be good to propagandize or sway people in that direction?
To stop our adversaries being aware of the reality situation and from investing into it and proceeding past. And because, again, we're artificially constraining ourselves, right? Because we're trying to keep it a secret.
Ooh, right.
So now that game is changing, right? I think there's been this delay within the Biden administration to just kind of ignore that problem for the next, for whatever problem is more relevant.
I don't think he's running anything. I don't. She's not even showing up for it. I never see her anywhere anymore.
Yeah, they're
it's just unfortunate. They're checked out. It's over.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, okay, then who's running it?
They discuss legislative hearings, declassified videos, and the gradual shift in policy regarding UAPs. The psychological impact on those in the military who've seen these phenomena but were previously discouraged from speaking out is also addressed. The mental toll on pilots who experience UAPs is a significant topic. Graves discusses how these pilots, trained to deal with known threats, face confusion and fear when encountering the unknown. He shares anecdotes of pilots who face ridicule or skepticism, affecting their mental health. The podcast explores how these encounters can lead to a re-evaluation of one's understanding of science and reality. It's not just about what you saw, it's about how you're seen after, Graves remarks.
And consistently, when we were flying with these newer radars, we were picking up a bunch of objects that were operating in our working area that we weren't seeing with the older radar. They were performing in strange ways. They would be stationary. They would be around 250 to 350 knots, kind of meandering around the area. Not really working together per se, but kind of clearly operating in the same vicinity as one another, right? We come within about 500 feet of these objects. All our sensors are pumped into our helmet, augmented reality style, and it would tell us exactly where to look, and boom, we'd come right past this object and there'd be nothing there. We'd circle back around and then pick it back up on our sensors. It would be slightly displaced, but that was kind of status quo for a few weeks until we had a near miss with one of these objects right at the entrance to our working areas. The pilot came back, canceled the flight, had a look of shock on his face, and described it as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere. And once that happened, we kind of had to come together as a squadron with the safety officer in our squadron and say, hey, okay, what's going on? This has kind of been rumor and conjecture, but we almost had a near miss here, almost lost an aircraft. Let's gather as much information as we can. As it turned out, there are 4 other near misses that had occurred in the past month that pilots were too uncomfortable to even report. And that really kind of kicked off the seriousness of this issue for us. And we started filing paperwork, safety reports, and hoping and expecting that this would get resolved in some way as, the proper people, whoever that was, got these reports and they could mitigate it in some way.
Support systems, both official and informal, for pilots dealing with these experiences are discussed, including changes in policy to address mental health concerns. Graves and Rogan discuss how UAPs are portrayed in the media and public consciousness. They talk about the shift from fringe conspiracy to a topic gaining mainstream interest. The influence of movies, TV shows, and now more credible journalism on public perception is analysed. They mention how past hoaxes have muddled the waters, but also how recent, more verifiable incidents have helped legitimise the field. We've moved from the days of the X-Files to something much more grounded and real, Graves notes.
In 2017, a New York Times article came out. I was now an instructor pilot in Mississippi and for the Navy still. And on front page of New York Times, lo and behold, there are the video of the gimbal and the go fast with the pilot's audio on there that we've heard now. And I'm like, holy shit, these videos now have been somewhat smuggled out. They're on the front page of New York Times. And
do we know how the gimbal or the go fast videos got leaked?
My understanding is that work was done partially with Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon.
Yes. So with the crosshairs, is that they're trying to lock in on it? So now they've locked in on it, right?
Yeah, they weren't able to gain a lock in their air-to-air mode, so they actually had to degrade down to an air-to-surface mode, kind of a manual locking mode, and that's that box that you see.
What is the difference?
The air-to-air mode should essentially be looking exactly where the radar is dropping them off and should automatically lock on it. But in the method that you're seeing here, the pilot's manually slewing the sensor. This is kind of like a last-ditch effort to get it. And he's like restarting it, and that's why the box keeps getting bigger, and it's getting smaller. It's not capturing it.
What would be the difficulty? Why is it difficult to lock on?
We don't know. One theory is that it's because it's relatively close to the ground, and there's a lot of background, right, to confuse the sensor. But it's
How far off the ocean is this supposed to be?
It's somewhere around 10,000 feet or so. So it's really not that close. So it's really not a great explanation, but yeah, you can see him try it there.
Now, what do they estimate the size of this thing to be?
I don't know if anyone has estimated a size, to be honest. Probably like 180, 190 miles per hour. So that's showing us that it's cooler than the surrounding environment for whatever reason.
Which is very bizarre for something that's moving 170 whatever miles an hour.
Yeah. This one's black hot, so this is showing us that it's hotter than the surrounding areas right now.
And would this be similar to what you would see if you saw a jet that was flying?
No. I mean, we've seen thousands of aircraft like that.
But I mean, in terms of the signature that it gives off with the temperature, or would you be able to see a visible means of propulsion that would be accentuated?
Yeah, you would see the exhaust coming out of the back. You'd be able to see the skin of the aircraft itself. So the sensor is not great, but it's good enough where you can break out some pretty good detail on a jet. I mean, it looks like a jet.
Right. Well, this definitely doesn't look like a jet. It kind of looks like a flying saucer. And then it turns sideways, which is really weird. So as far as you know, we don't have anything that moves like that.
No.
And we don't have anything that gives off a signature like that.
No.
And were they able to figure out where this is going or keep an eye on it? Or do we have sensors that can detect this for any length of time?
I don't have that information.
The potential of UAPs to change humanity's view of its place in the universe is considered, alongside the responsibility of media to report accurately. The scientific approach to studying UAPs is another focal point. Graves explains the need for rigorous data collection and analysis beyond just anecdotal evidence. He discusses collaborations between scientists, former military personnel, and civilians to create a robust database of sightings. We need to approach this scientifically, not just with stories, Graves insists.
I think there is this pressure right now within the U.S. government that if we do not further invest, somehow bring in, the primary innovation makers within our economy, within the startup community, within the scientific community, into this problem, if it's still just buried in a classified area, then we're going to get outcompeted by China that is able to dump all these resources into it.
Well, how do you do that though? If these people that create these things are motivated by money, right? If they're motivated by profits, if they run major corporations, like how can you convince them to invest in something that is ultimately not going to pay off like it would if you were investing in a consumer product?
Yeah, I think it can. I mean, we have a model for that in the United States with deep technology and edge technology. These are capabilities that don't fit into a normal VC's life cycle of 5 or 6 years before you're seeing returns. It might take 10 years.
The conversation includes the role of organisations like SCU, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, in pushing for scientific inquiry. They also touch on how academia is slowly beginning to engage with this topic, though still with caution. The global aspect of UAP sightings is addressed, noting that these phenomena are not exclusive to American skies. Graves shares insights from international colleagues and how different nations are dealing with similar incidents. The podcast speculates on whether there could be an international agreement or secrecy regarding UAPs. It's not just us. Pilots from around the world are seeing this, he states.
The government, let's just say they, if you were them, if you had some knowledge that this stuff was possible, but you couldn't put it in the private sector because then it would get pilfered, you'd get infiltrated by Chinese spies, which happens all the time, right? Wouldn't you hide it away? Wouldn't you squirrel it away somewhere? Like if you're doing the right thing, if you're being intelligent about it, essentially can't be public because it is in the interest of national security because it's such a big deal. Like if they develop a propulsion system that is completely reliant on gravity and they figure out like they're bending time, just flying places instantaneously. If that's the future of space travel, like whoever gets there first, that's a big fucking deal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really big deal. And that can't be out there in the public where China could steal the data or Russia could steal the data or Iran could steal the you can't have anybody get a hold of this.
Well, here's the thing. If we're the sole superpower in the world, then I think it makes sense for us to hold that information back and develop it on our pace because we're not worried about competitors. They're going to catch up to us and potentially leapfrog us. But when we're operating in a world where we have near peer or peer adversaries such as China that do have the ability to potentially work on the same technology, that's where the model breaks down a bit, right? Because if we're artificially slowing our progress in order to maintain the secrecy and someone is catching up to us, our only real solution at that point is to activate, the millions of super smart and motivated people in our country to start pushing ourselves ahead, lest we get leapfrogged by countries that can do that through their own private investments, such as China.
They discuss potential diplomatic implications if UAPs were confirmed to be of extraterrestrial origin and how this might affect global politics and cooperation. Finally, the conversation looks to the future, pondering what the acknowledgement of UAPs could mean for humanity. Graves and Rogan discuss the potential technological leaps, philosophical shifts, and changes in societal structures that could come about. They consider the ethical considerations of such a revelation and the unpreparedness of society for such a paradigm shift. This could be the biggest story in human history.
Can you imagine how President Trump would be remembered across history if he moved this conversation forward?
Yeah, if we just knew what they know. You don't have to tell us what's possible, what it can do, what you've engineered from it. Tell us something's going on. What is that thing? What's that thing that's going on?
Yep.
Is that thing ours? If it is, that's fucking crazy. You guys have been holding back some insane shit. And if it's not ours, then we need to know. And I think that would change the human conversation. I mean, Ronald Reagan talked about that in the United Nations speech in was it the 1980s?
Yeah.
Do you remember that speech?
Yep.
He talked about how united we would all be if the threat of an alien invasion was happening on Earth, how quickly we would put aside our differences.
All the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war?
Hell of a speech.
Yeah. Maybe it's time for another one.
They end by discussing how individuals might prepare for or contribute to this new era of understanding. And that's that. Joe Rogan and Ryan Graves emphasise the importance of continued dialogue and research into UAPs. They highlight how this episode not only shares personal experiences, but also calls for a broader understanding and acceptance of these phenomena. Graves's insights provide a compelling narrative that blends personal testimony with a call for scientific and societal change. Keep your eyes on the skies, Graves concludes, echoing a sentiment of both vigilance and curiosity for what might lie beyond our current understanding. If you learned something new and want to spread some love, we would really appreciate if you hit the bell icon to get a head start on new episodes uploaded every other day. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment below with an alien to show us you stayed to the end and enjoyed the episode. If you want to stay updated, head on over to X and give us a follow at solutionsAI_. All links are super easy to find down in the description and pinned to the top comment. We'd love if you share our stuff with your friends and family too. And most importantly, be sure to stay curious. See you next time. Sai out.